Good evening. I'd like to get the supplemental budget hearing going. We'd all like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. So I'm sure, as everybody knows, we're here tonight to have a supplemental budget hearing to go over strictly Article number 7. We've previously had a budget hearing for the previous 6 articles. So all communication tonight will be strictly on Article number 7. I hope everybody had a chance to pick up the flyer up there so we can kind of read through this together. Article 7, by petition, to see if Newfound Area School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $250,000 to implement a full-time kindergarten program in all 4 elementary schools in district as a minimum commencing in September 2015. I'd like to open the floor up for any discussions.
Hi, my name is Dara Alquist, and I am a homeowner in New Hampton.
Can't hear you.
Oh, what was that?
Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh,
Just get a little closer to the mic.
okay. Yep, it's Dara Alquist. I'm a homeowner in New Hampton. My daughter will be attending kindergarten in the fall. A full-day kindergarten program is huge for our family. My husband and I are full-time working parents, and right now we're paying for childcare, which is $7,500 plus a year. If we can't get full-time kindergarten next year, we're going to have to pay out of pocket to send her to a private facility for kindergarten out of the district, and that's, you know, a huge concern for me. We pay taxes, and to not be able to send her to the school in our town would sadden me. Also, a lot of the children that are in our daycare have been in full-time programs for the past few years, and I feel as though putting them into a kindergarten of only 2 or 3 hours a day actually kind of steps them back a little bit. I know for my daughter, she'll be there for 8 hours, and I'll pick her up from preschool at 4 o'clock, and she doesn't want to go home. I think the kids retain so much these days, and I think that things are changing. Not many parents are able to stay home with their children, whereas before, you know, one parent maybe was able to stay home and, you know, half-day kindergarten, you know, it was just kind of getting their feet wet, so to speak. But I definitely feel that things are changing, and children have been in these programs for years, and they're definitely ready for a full-day kindergarten, and I think it would be beneficial to a lot of people. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Peterson, and I'm the kindergarten teacher at Bridgewater Hebron Village School, and I'm also a Bristol resident. And I wanted to give the kindergarten teacher perspective. Right now, we're teaching probably a full-day program in a half-day situation, which is really difficult. And now we're doing Common Core now, and the standards, it's a lot more rigorous. We are teaching children to read. They are reading at the end of kindergarten. And the math curriculum is a lot more advanced than it was in the past. And there isn't a lot of time for the social skills that we used to teach. And so I think that with full day, we can get all we need to get in for the academics and then still have time. It'll be a more relaxed day, we'll have lunch, could have recess, which we don't really have time for now. We don't have any recess. There's an early morning recess at our school, but that's it, no other recess. And we really don't have time for centers or for that time that children would play together in the classroom and learn to do the cooperative skills, sharing, all those things that you typically think of as what you learn in kindergarten. That's not, you know, we're not able to do that as much. It's a real balancing act to get to fit that in. And also, the other point I wanted to make was for the parents. I think it's very difficult for parents to pick up their children if they're morning kindergarten, they have to come and pick them up themselves. There's only bus transportation in the morning, and if we have afternoon kindergarten, it's the same thing. The parents have to get them there at the start of kindergarten, and then they take the bus home. And we have quite a few children every year that miss quite a bit of school because they just can't. The parents might know in the morning, I can't pick him up at 11, so I'm sorry, he's just going to have to miss today because I won't be able, no one can pick him up. And it's a real child care issue also for what do you do for the rest of that day that they're not in school. So I think it really would benefit the children academically and socially, and also it would really help out the parents in the district.
Thank you.
Hi, Annie Learned, Bristol. I have a couple of questions. The first is regarding the cost of the program, because it would be a warrant article this year, so it's my understanding it wouldn't impact, the tax cap doesn't come into play because it's separate, correct?
I'll let Stacy kind of speak to that one.
Actually, if you can stay for the meetings
Yep.
afterwards, we'll be talking about the impact on the tax cap and how that works.
Yeah, because that would be my concern is if it doesn't really impact the budget next year, what's going to happen next year? Are we going to have to find $250,000 someplace else to take it out to make room for this if we wanted to go forward? The second is regarding the staffing of the kindergarten. Are there any recommendations regarding an increase in staffing in the classroom moving from half day to full day? I can see maybe potential concerns with it's tough to keep the interest and keep the engagement of students that age, and are there more teachers or aides in the classroom required going from half day to full day, where it might be tougher in the afternoons to keep the kids under control and to make sure that everyone's focused and has the attention that they need? Are there any different recommendations regarding staffing moving from half day to full day?
I'm sure that the school board and Stacy have all kinds of questions like that. I'm not sure if they want to speak to those now or not, but I know it's a lot of questions for everybody on
Okay.
those type of things.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to the article?
Hi, Susan Colby, Bristol. I would just like to say that I'm in favor of having an all-day kindergarten. I know that on Facebook, some people had suggested maybe it being an option of half-day, and I absolutely don't think it would work. I like that the warrant article says full-day for all of the schools, because I think it would give all of the kids the same advantage. There's so much more expected of the kids these days. It's amazing what they know going into first grade that they used to learn while they were there. They're learning so much more in kindergarten, and the expectations are much higher. So I do hope that the boards will support this article. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred Robinson from Danbury. I have a question just on the wording of the article itself. In the last sentence where it says full-time kindergarten program in all 4 elementary schools in said district as a minimum, what does the as a minimum mean? I really don't understand why that is in there and what it might mean. That's all.
This was a petition warrant article that was submitted to the school, and that's the wording that it's
So
kind of in there. I don't know
that's
if
just the
Stacy
wording
had-
that was verbatim. Okay. All right, so it doesn't have any specific meaning that we know of then?
For us, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm going to go to the public mic.
Okay.
Excuse me. Can I speak?
Yep.
Vincent Paul Migliori from Bridgewater. Couple points on this. After the board had considered the kindergarten, I was approached by an individual who wanted to do a petition warrant article. And he asked for some guidance on this. And one of the things in answer to Fred's question regarding the wording, there was a question whether or not a half-day program could also be added. And so I guess the gentleman made the choice to put at a minimum to give the school district administration the option of considering a half-day program for those that clearly had indicated, at least orally, in the United Support for Education group, that they would like to see both options. So that's the answer to that question. The other thing regarding the cost of daycare, I would submit to you that that is not an issue that we as individual taxpayers should concern ourselves with. And that's not a reason to present to the voters, in my personal opinion, that we should go with a full day or half day or kindergarten at all. The sole reason, in my opinion, for adding a kindergarten to our district should be to improve student outcomes. We have taken steps over the past few years to do so by getting a new superintendent, by adding a curriculum coordinator, which was a very important step in trying to bring the entire district together. And I personally feel that the next logical step for us, for the purpose of improving student outcomes, would be to bring the children into school early in the form of a kindergarten for a full day for that essentially 13th year of education. And that in and of itself, in my opinion, will improve the student outcome. It will also, according to data, reduce the overall expenditures that we'll be required to make over the years for special education needs, which in the long haul gets to be very, very expensive. And if that's a way that we can reduce that expenditure over the period of 13 years that the child is in school, I think it would behoove the district to consider doing so, which is why I would speak in favor of this article. I have a number of questions that I'd like to know about process-wise regarding the limitations and funding issues. And I think that's information that we need to share in order for people to determine whether they will be in favor of it or not at both the deliberative session and then the second session on voting day in March. And so I would respectfully request that we educate the public on exactly what the process will need to be, given that we have a petitioned warrant article. I personally have been unable to find anything in the RSAs or any of the administrative rules that say anything about sequence of warrant articles and the impact. It is my belief that if the legislative body, which is those who attend the deliberative session and those who vote on voting day, decide that they want to fund an article and are in favor of it and vote accordingly, that the tax cap issue becomes irrelevant. It's just a matter of the will of the legislative body. That is not true for the governing body, which is the school board and the budget committee. Technically, I guess it's the school board. While the budget committee puts forth the budgetary number that gets presented at the deliberative session, and because we have a tax cap, that amount is what we have to deal with. If we want to do something that will exceed it, then it's up to the legislative body to decide to do so. I don't know what the discussion is going to be in terms of what impact we will have on the session itself or on the articles that are put forth, or necessarily the sequence. But it's my understanding that that information should have no impact based on what the legislative body wants to do. And I also believe that that's true with respect to reference in the RSAs with respect to a 10% limitation. Now, I would leave that up to the legal people to actually tell us that. I did make a request for an attorney to be present for the hearing this evening. Whether it's necessary or not, I guess we'll yet to find out, but there could be some issues. Frankly, I don't see them as being a problem if the legislative body decides, for whatever reasons it deems it's appropriate, and I hope it has entirely to do with improvement of student outcomes, that this may be a good idea. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and then if there's no more public discussion, the Budget Committee will be holding a brief meeting after this hearing is over. At some point, the Budget Committee will have a meeting tonight, right after the school board. School board will be meeting directly after this hearing. And again, thank you guys for coming, and that concludes our hearing. Yeah, the meetings will be in the library, right down the hallway here.
You need a motion?
Thank
You're
you.
all set? Okay, and I'm going to call our meeting to order at 6:57. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Cheney. Yes. Jen Rose, Bristol.
Here.
Myself from Denver, Ruby Hill, yes. Jeff Yvette Bratton, John Franklin, and Christine Long here. Okay, at this time, is there any request for modification of the agenda? Okay, then the agenda is approved and we'll go forward. I've done a lot of legwork with Stacy's help on this warrant article to get some answers for you. So I've got handouts for you, but I'm going to give them the gist and then okay. So Stacy consulted with our attorney on how to handle this, how it's funded, and all of that. I then asked the New Hampshire School Board Association for a second opinion, which I have for you as well. And then one of the things that attorney recommended was that we also contact the Department of Revenue Administration And in a nutshell, even though I'm going to give you copies of everything, what they said was, we and the Budget Committee cannot exceed the tax cap, but the voters can. Okay, so that's the gist of it. But I'm going to hand out each of the things that we have for you to consider. So first, we have several questions answered by our attorney, and I'm going to read these for the public. So questions asked of our attorney first were, do all school board presented articles have to fall within the tax cap? And the opinion is yes, the tax cap statute applies to the budget certified by the governing body or the budget committee and posted with the warrant for the annual meeting. And then second, it refers to the RSAs, and then second it says the RSA defines budget as a statement of recommended appropriations and anticipated revenues submitted to the legislative body by the budget committee or the governing body if there is no budget committee, as an attachment to and as part of the warrant for an annual or special meeting. Thus, the budget means not just the operating budget articles, but also separate and special warrant articles. In my opinion, the budget certified and recommended budget include not just the operating budget article, but all separate and special warrant articles recommended, and that's underlined and that's important, by the school board or budget committee. Second, do all school board presented articles and petition warrant articles have to fall within the tax cap? As discussed above, the tax cap applies to the budget certified by the governing body or the budget committee and posted with the warrant or the recommended budget. Therefore, if the school board or the budget committee recommends a petition warrant article, that amount must be covered by the tax cap. If the budget committee and school board do not recommend a petition article, the article still must be placed in the warrant and the voters must be given an opportunity to vote on it. Again, references to RSAs. The tax cap limit applies only to the budget that is recommended by the budget committee or the school board. If neither the budget committee nor the board recommends a petition article, there is no violation of the tax cap. Third question, if a petition warrant article does not fall within the tax cap, what happens? Is it funded, and how is it determined which articles are funded? And the tax cap is binding only on the budget submitted by the school board or budget committee. The district meeting may override the tax cap by approving a warrant article that takes the total over the cap. And again, a reference to an RSA that reads, the legislative body, in parentheses, district meeting, may override the cap by the usual procedures applicable to annual meetings and deliberative sessions of the legislative body. The provisions of this section shall not limit the legislative body's authority to increase or decrease the amount of any appropriation or the total amount of all appropriations. Therefore, if the petition article is approved, the article will be funded even though the result is that taxes may exceed the cap. Next question, how will potential revenue from Hill impact any of these petition warrant articles and revenues? This is a good question which no one can answer at this time because we do not know if the Hill and the Newfound voters will approve the proposed tuition agreement. If the voters of both districts approve the tuition agreement, the revenue to be received from Hill will have the effect of lowering Newfound's taxes, therefore potentially increasing the amount of appropriations that can be made without exceeding the tax cap. Next question, at the deliberative session, can the petition warrant article amounts be changed by the public body? The dollar amounts of any warrant articles can be changed at the deliberative session. All that is required is that a motion to amend the amount on the warrant article be made, seconded, and voted in the affirmative. This applies to petition warrant articles as well as to all other warrant articles. The authority to amend warrant articles is exercised by the voters at the deliberative first session in a Senate Bill 2 school district such as Newfound. Next question, can a motion from the floor at deliberative session be made to raise the budget to cover the petition warrant article? A motion can be made on the floor of the deliberative meeting to raise the budget to raise the amount in the operating budget article for any purpose, including funding the petition warrant article. It seems more likely, however, that the money to fund the petition warrant article will be in the petition article itself, and it does have a dollar value. Next question, if so, what the higher budget passes on the ballot, but the kindergarten warrant article fails, is there any obligation on our part to use the funds for what the floor motion intended? If the higher budget number passes on the ballot and the kindergarten warrant article fails, the school board will be free to use the increase to the operating budget for any of the purposes listed in the operating budget. There is no way to restrict the school board's legal authority to spend the money for any purpose in the operating budget once it has been appropriated. Next, what would be the consequences, pro and con, of someone at deliberative session increasing the budget to cover the cost of a petition warrant article, even though the petition warrant article is still on the warrant? And this answer is, since the petition article includes an appropriation for the money required to pay for kindergarten, it would not make sense to increase the operating budget article to cover the cost for kindergarten. However, the consequences, if someone chooses to do so, would be that there would be money in the operating budget to cover the cost of the petition warrant article, and there would be no need for an appropriation under the petition warrant article. The disadvantage would be that if there is money in the petition warrant article and the operating budget article is increased to cover the cost of kindergarten, and both articles are approved, you will have extra money in the budget that is not needed. Next question, if someone makes a general motion from the floor to increase the budget so that it now goes over the tax cap, is this okay? Or does there need to be a motion to override the tax cap and then one to increase the budget? So we're asking, do we require two separate motions? As discussed above, all the tax cap does is limit the amount of the operating budget that may be proposed by the school board and budget committee. It has no effect on the authority of the district meeting to appropriate money. Therefore, the district meeting may vote to increase the budget or the appropriation under any warrant article so that the total exceeds the tax cap. There is no need for a special motion to override the tax cap. All that is required is that the total appropriated by the voters exceeds the tax cap amount. Final question. If the kindergarten warrant article fails, can the board look to implement this the following year through the budget process? In other words, when does the no mean no idea expire? If the kindergarten warrant article fails, no means that for the fiscal year that runs from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016, the school board may not spend any money to implement kindergarten. The no means no prohibition would not apply to a future year during which money for kindergarten might be included in the operating budget rather than in a separate article. Now, I sent an email before getting all of these answers in print because Stacy had called this attorney and then we followed up by asking for those answers to be in print. And so this is what I sent to there, Christina, who some of you know. And keep in mind that we're the only district that's a cooperative district with a budget cap. So, with a tax cap, I mean, so a lot of this is new to a lot of people. Yeah. So, I just said, let me preface this by saying we're an SB2 district with a 2% tax cap. We received a petition warrant article after we had already held our budget hearing and subsequent meetings. The article was on the last day that petition items can be received, so it was done in the legal time frame and does have the minimum number of registered voters as signatories. We will now be holding a second budget hearing, budget committee meeting, and school board meeting all on this Wednesday evening to discuss this new article. Here are some details. The article asks for $250,000 to be spent. This exceeds our tax cap. Our attorney advised us that even warrant articles must fall within the tax cap. The voters at our deliberative session have the right to raise the budget by up to 10% even with a tax cap. Our warrant has traditionally put the budget as the last article in order to keep people at the table until the end, which was done before SB2. This year we planned on the same order. Our attorney's advice is that with a tax cap, the articles will be funded in the order in which they are voted for until the tax cap is reached, meaning if the budget is the last item and the previous items passed along with this one will exceed the cap, the budget would pass, but we could only spend up to the cap, essentially meaning that our budget would have to be cut. Now, remember, I had this information before we got the written opinion, so that was what I'd been told, which now you can see is different. So my question was, is this your opinion as well? Is this the only way to fund this article? If the public wishes it to be funded through a motion from the floor at the deliberative session to raise the budget amount. On the flip side is his response. And he says, I agree with the recommendation from your district's private attorney that the operating budget should be placed at the beginning of the warrant in the event the total appropriations exceed the tax cap. I searched through the statutes and the Department of Revenue Administration rules, but I can't find the specific law that states the DRA will disallow appropriations that exceed the tax cap, or alternatively, exceed the 10% limitation. However, I do recall conversations with colleagues, specifically at the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and at training sessions for moderators, that the position of the DRA is to allow appropriations up to the tax cap limit and then disallow subsequent appropriations. In the meantime, I'll keep searching the applicable statutes and will forward any specific legal authority I can find. I can also contact some colleagues to verify, and in the meantime, you or someone from the district may want to call the Department of Revenue Administration and confirm. So I asked Stacy to do that today, and I thought they gave us some real clear guidance. Do you want to report on that?
Yeah, so the big key piece here is recommended by the school board or budget committee. So the guidance we have gotten is that if the school board and budget committee recommend the article, it has to fall within the tax cap. If you don't recommend the article or take no stance on it, so you don't make a recommendation at all, either for or against, it does not have to fall within the tax cap. That's the kind of a $30,000 view. Interestingly, Mike and I called the DRA as well, and they basically gave us the same advice about the recommendation or non-recommendation. They interestingly said they don't manage a tax cap for us because it's a local decision. And so basically it's our voters who will manage the tax cap if we go over it. The DRA will not say we won't fund it because it's, again, a tax cap is a local decision that they don't manage. And so it would be our taxpayers who would then say, wait, you went over the tax cap to fund this article. But that would only occur if both bodies recommended the article. So the attorney's kind of recommendation was that either you not recommend it or you don't take a stance on it. And she said you could do that two ways, is just don't put anything, so the warrant article will look exactly like this without anything on it. Or you could put a statement that says something like, the school board does not take a position on this article. So one is you don't also want the public to really question anything, like that you didn't have a conversation around it. She said you could go either way with it. But she said you could, if you wanted to put something on there, that you could say the school board and the budget committee did not take a stance on that article. No action taken.
And that was what was in quotes kind of, was they said, the school board has taken no action on this article, the budget committee has taken no action. And the question is whether that's better than blank or worse than blank. Because if that's what we choose, then people at the deliberative session, the first one, will understand why. People at the polls won't. Jeff?
I have a question regarding Barbara Lohman's answer to 10 and the no means no prohibition. She says that if the article fails, the school board may not spend any money to implement kindergarten. Does that mean that our existing kindergarten
No, I think all
program-
day kindergarten. It's the shift to the all-day.
It's only for 1 year.
For 1 year, yeah. And that was a question that comes up, like, so if it fails, like, when can we continue to look at an all-day kindergarten? So I thought we'd get that in writing, so it's basically one fiscal year.
Sounds like we're in sync, Madam Chair. It sounds also like we're in sync with respect to the discussion we had regarding recommendations or not regarding the petition warrant. Probably a good idea just to leave it.
That's what I thought. For the audience who doesn't know, we discussed whether or not we recommend petition warrant articles when we were going over the original warrant, and we've never made a recommendation before. But on advice of the SAU, we did, and I can't honestly remember the rationale now, except there was something about your reporting, right? That
We clarified that. So on reporting, we put that in as not recommended. Of course, that's not a public, that's not going to go on the ballot as not recommended, because essentially by taking no action or actually taking action to not recommend, we will input it into the documents as not recommended.
Just for the financial
Financial,
report.
right.
Yep.
So, but the question about, so on a petition warrant article, should you make a recommendation? No, under normal circumstances, you don't have a tax cap that you're considering, so it is good for the board to take a stand, and the budget committee to take a stand on whether, is this something you support or not? Certainly with the tax cap and the second warrant article, I mean, the first warrant article clearly falls within that tax cap, so that really is a null issue whether you make a recommendation or not. It's a small dollar amount. But certainly for this one, you want to consider not making a recommendation so that if it does pass at the ballot, that it can be funded, no problem. We've learned a lot about tax caps. Just so you know too, the DRA, this is the first kind of time they're doing this. They actually are bringing it to their roundtable with all the administrators to kind of have a conversation around this to try to figure out what is, like what really should we be looking at, changes in legislation, what should we be doing to make sure that this is really clear.
There is a 10% cap,
Yeah.
which the DRA will disallow anything over that cap. So the problem that they're running into is, do they enforce your tax cap by also disallowing it? They're gonna bring this case into a DRA roundtable tomorrow, because they've not experienced that, because really the 10% is also a tax cap, if you think about it. And this is a further legal restriction on that, so should they disallow in front of that is a question they need to take up.
But I think the advice we've gotten, it's been kind of solidified by 3 different parties, so I think it's a good response.
That they can and we can't. That's kind of what the message is. The public can and we can't. Simon?
Just a question on the operating budget. There was one example, and it's in the, it stated that they could add the $250,000 into the operating budget number. If that would happen, we voted to recommend that article. Would we have to recommend? Because then it would be over the tax cap.
You have to cut to match it.
No, so if they,
No,
so.
if the public at the deliberative session
Gotcha.
voted to raise the operating budget by $250,000.
They override us.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm good with that,
So
but
we don't
does that
vote
drop off the recommendation on the warrant?
No.
The
No.
question
That's why
is
you raise
though,
it twice.
It's
That's
just
the
amended
answer.
by the public. Our recommended budget is just amended by the public through that.
I'm just looking at.
I understand
yeah, so the
what
question
you're
would be,
saying.
so, yeah,
Recommended by
and I
the
can certainly,
governing body.
and I can certainly look at that. I'm not sure, because the recommendations are really for the warrant, not the ballot, although they show up on the ballot as well. I can research whether you can re-vote, because, so at the budget hearing, like if you had made a recommendation for, I think you may be able to go back and re-vote if that has changed at deliberative session. Because certainly if somebody raises by the 10% and both bodies don't recommend that,
I don't agree.
like I said, I'll look at it, I can research it.
Yeah,
but-
because it's kind of like minutes. This is what
Right.
happened. The warrant was created, it was recommended, it was presented at the first of the 2 sessions, and the legislative body decided to amend it upward or down. In either case, the recommendation of the budget committee has been altered, or stands, even though the article's been altered.
Your vote would still be bound by the cap, so.
Right, he's talking about the recommendation, though, can you,
Rick,
if
if you
it
went
was,
back, your vote would still be bound by the cap. Their vote is not. So like if they amend the budget by an additional $250,000, that's fine, and that can be voted on as in the warrant article. But we can't go back and say, oh, now we have that 250,000, because you are still bound by the cap.
right,
Yeah.
Sue?
Well, I'm a little confused. We've always been told at our town meetings, at our deliberative session, that the voters could raise the budget by up to 10%. Now,
Yes.
isn't 250,000 more than 10%?
Well, I have a better question for you.
And, so if they can't, can they?
$2.5 million would be.
Two-
Yeah.
that's right.
Right.
Great, question one answer.
Okay, no wonder I'm
You've
confused.
got
Oh,
plenty
hold
to
on, let her
look
ask her
over.
second
Okay,
question.
no, I don't have a second question
Okay, all
now.
right, so now.
Well, I have a more specific question with regard to where you were going with that.
Yeah.
And I directed to Mike for his opinion. Is it 10% of the taxes raised, or is it 10% of the entire budget?
It is, hold on, there's a.
Fireworks budget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's still below.
It's actually about the
That's not assessment related.
right,
It's
it's
10%
the
of the
prior year's budget. It's in-
minus any assessments, any bond or interest.
Those $2 million bucks.
Raise the budget.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
somewhere in the same line.
Well, you know where I was
Yeah,
going.
Don?
Question, with all the other articles having the board and the budget committee votes, should we consider voting to abstain? So that does show that there was a vote?
Yes, if you think we're ready, we would need the specific language if we want to put anything on there at all.
Right,
So
that's my
that-
question.
right.
is
Well, so
when-
that,
Whether
that's
to
gonna be
put
the
on
question.
a vote
Right.
or put on nothing.
right, yeah.
I would suggest, and I'm inclined to make a motion that we do nothing, to not impact the warrant. But we're free to speak when this article comes up, to indicate that, we're blazing new ground here, as we've heard from even the DRA discussion. We did so when the tax cap first got implemented, and we found out that the legislature made a big approval. And that was uncovered as a result of blazing new ground. So this doesn't surprise me. I would be more inclined to make a motion to not do a recommendation on this, to cover ourselves with the legal advice, and then take the liberty for each of us that would like to stand up and speak about the brief history of this situation, and then, render your opinion on whether you're in favor of it. But as a board, remember, we already voted.
Well, part of why we have got multiple opinions, so we wouldn't end up with an emergency legislative, inquiry.
We don't want to do that.
Again. So, any other questions or discussion before I do call for the motion? Okay, so I'm open to entertain. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the board take no action on the petition warrant article received for this year's deliberative session.
Can I just make a friendly suggestion that it say, take no action on the, and be a little more specific?
On a recommendation or not for the petition warrant article received for this year's deliberative session.
There are two.
Right, so do you want to say the kindergarten petition warrant article, or the one being discussed tonight?
Article 7.
petition article 7.
Okay, for petition of Article 7.
Just so that for the record, we know.
Yeah. Now, well, I need a second.
Yes, I was going to say we need a second to discuss. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, now discussion on the motion.
Can I speak to it with a question?
Yes.
Before we use the logic of putting the operating budget sequence last for purposes of keeping the audience in attendance, the logic.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't be consistent with that logic? Could I ask clarification on that, perhaps, from you or superintendent?
Well, the early recommendation was that they be in the order of funding, but now we know that doesn't matter because everything above it, everything above this falls within the 2% tax cap anyway. I would suggest putting this one last only because it looks different from the rest. I think it's going to look even funnier if it's in the middle of these that have registered votes, school board recommend, budget committee. Oh, there's one that doesn't. I honestly think it's stand out and make people uneasy about it. Where if it's
I don't
can.
disagree with that. I'm just concerned about only the kindergarten people sticking around if you will, for lack of a
For the
better term,
discussion.
and voting it through, whereas if everybody was there to consider the whole thing, it would be far more democratic.
Yeah, well, and I'm thinking of the polls and you're thinking of the meeting,
Yeah.
so I know.
Now,
You
it-
can't,
You can't change it at the meeting, you can't change the purpose of the warrant article.
right, but it
no,
could be amended.
it's not.
Yeah, right.
It
Anything.
could be amended to
$1.
or 500, or,
Yeah.
some other.
No.
Like last year.
So I just, I don't know.
Anyone else? Well, that's kind of our next agenda item, though. The order is our next
Oh, you have
agenda.
that
Yeah,
on?
order of warrant is next, so first.
Oh,
it's
okay, I'm
just-
sorry, I
That's
forgot
okay.
about that.
So the first one is recommendations, so is there, are there any other comments on this?
Just procedurally, I don't totally understand having a motion to take no action and then discussion on no, it just seems very weird to me. I just want to say that. It doesn't really seem to make any sense.
Yeah.
You understand completely.
Well, you have to have a motion and a second before you are supposed to discuss the
Well-
motion, and then you vote on it.
You're questioning the motion itself, right?
I guess I'm questioning the point of order of the motion, really, to be honest with you, because I find it weird to take action on a non-action.
Go ahead, yeah.
I understand where you're coming from on that. However, in blazing new trail, and it prompted us to get a legal opinion for which we have to pay, I think it would behoove us to be on record as having followed the legal opinion. And to do that, we should be on record as deliberately not taking action on it, so that there is a DRA record to go back to that says, okay, we clearly did not recommend it, or we clearly recommended it. And that will not be the case if we take this action and approve this motion. If we leave it alone, it achieves the same net impact, I agree, but it doesn't address the issue of the recommendation. And I know that is a little strange, but procedurally, this is what we come up with. And again, initially, there was some concern about sequence.
The other point is that all the prior warrants, we did have a recommendation. So I think we should take action as to whether
Recommend or not.
we recommend it or not.
Just a question. So if we don't take a stance on this and somebody does bring this forward at the deliberative, can, say, to raise the budget, can the board and the budget people vote as taxpayer people? Absolutely. Okay. So you're taking a stance, but as a taxpayer, not a board.
And that's why we asked, what if it's raised and the petition warrant article is passed? Then we've raised $500,000. Because we've raised it in both places. So that's why we're doing it.
That's kind of why I was looking at sequence.
Yeah.
That-
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to call the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passed by aye vote.
So basically, it will remain the same, there won't be any language on it, all it will just be as is.
And I would ask, Madam Chair, if someone does stand at the deliberative session and ask, how come there's no recommendation, that you address it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Our next item is the order of warrant articles on the warrant. And that's on there and of the early advice that we got. And so now we have to discuss where this one and I understand because of this last comment that you made, or it might make sense to have this before the budget. I don't know.
It eliminates the need for any discussion at all to amend the operating budget to a higher number.
If you get the sense that people at the first deliberative are in favor of it.
Well, we won't know because it's the second one.
Right, right.
It's just going to be discussed at the deliberative session.
So what, the reason this is on the agenda is what we were originally going to do was just list everything that came from the school board itself, and then list the things that came in that were petitioned, and it's just the two. Or we can leave it exactly as the copy you have is printed, which makes the kindergarten petition item last. So, looking for your thoughts on this.
How much effort will it take to move it?
Cut and paste.
It's a Word document.
We haven't printed this out.
Change 7 to 6 and 6 to 7.
Yeah.
I like the, oh, sorry. I like the two petition warrant articles together and the budget at the bottom. However, with the school board recommendation and the budget recommendations, where it's missing from that one, that is what makes me uneasy.
I know, that's what I thought, too, because it sticks out when it's in the middle, and it's at the end, it's not.
Well,
Hold on. What's that? Make it Article 2? Good, but, hold on, because Sue was waiting, go ahead.
Well, I'd rather see both petition warrant articles after the operating budget, because they weren't presented by the board or the budget committee, they were presented as petitions.
Right, right.
But I get that part, I don't know if we should have voted to recommend this one, but that was something we felt we had to do because the budget committee had, and it wouldn't look good.
That's exactly right. We thought since you guys recommended it, we couldn't just do nothing, because it would look funny. Hold on, no, Ben was next, then Don, then you. Ben? Oh, I don't know what you said now. Oh, Don?
I'd recommend that we move it after 5, for the reason that Vin's described. If we don't, there's a potential that they're going to add the 250, and you can describe why we didn't make a recommendation.
Yeah. Well, last time we met, we went over who was going to present which items, so I'll take that one and add that to mine. So we have a suggestion, that it's not a motion, but we have one suggestion between 5 and 6. We have one suggestion that both 5 and 7 go after. So both petition items go at the end. Are there any other suggestions? Yeah?
On what the budget committee might be willing to do. And again, this isn't a criticism of the superintendent or the SAU because they didn't have the history or had done this in the past. But what I was going to suggest was we could consider rescinding our vote as a school board on the petition warrant article, with the hope that the budget committee might consider doing the same thing. And then petition warrant articles, as in the past, would have no recommendation from either the budget committee or the school board, if they would decline. And that would eliminate the challenge of one petition article having none for legal reasons, and the other petition warrant article having a recommendation by both bodies, maybe by mistake. Certainly as a result of circumstance. But I honestly believe that it wouldn't be fair to everybody if too many people that showed up at the deliberative session left after the operating budget was finalized, one way or the other. And then a minority of people got to their way with whatever they wanted or whatever was left by petition. And that, I believe historically, is what's done in town meetings across the state. Their operating budgets are usually taken up last for that very reason.
Chris, did you?
People shouldn't leave.
That's right. And this is a way to keep them there.
You have to make a dumper and it's on a Saturday, you know? Any other thoughts?
I have a question
Yep.
that just kind of, it seems random, but it does track with what Vincent was just saying, but, so, go with me, the operating budget article, we're obligated, by assumption, to provide a recommendation. Who holds our feet to the fire on that?
We're
So to
not
speak?
obligated. It's in the RSA that we made.
Okay.
At some point in time, a board voted to make those recommendations, which kind of then enforces that you make those recommendations.
But again, Madam Superintendent, in the RSA, it says may, so it doesn't mean that we have to do them all.
I thought you had to on money ones now.
It's really a challenge, I don't have on computer.
Well, I don't think we're in danger of taking that one back.
Right.
So.
No, but I'll tell you the reason I ask, and I believe this is gonna come up, and just a belief, I believe that the budget committee may be the board that it becomes more of an issue on failure to recommend or not recommend, because, as Vincent just said, I don't have it sitting on me either, but there is some language, and it may be that you may recommend, but there is some language in reference to petition warrant articles as a special warrant article of recommending or not recommending within the RSA, which is kind of why I continue to find, I think there's discrepancies in both legal opinions and from DRA, and why I think there's more answers to be had, and I understand that maybe even at that level they're not there. I think, just to say it, I think it's because the tax cap, that piece of the RSA is very poorly written. When you look at the rest of RSA 32, it's a very well-written, very understandable piece of legislation. That section is not. And it's very vague and very confusing, and excludes items, defined terms that would clarify, just to say it. So I think there is language there. I'm not going to say what it is because I can't remember what it is, and I failed to print it out or bring any means to look it up. But I think that's another piece of the puzzle that we needed. So Stacy said something about clarifying a little bit more about that, but it just, I don't know. Comment.
I was just gonna say that the DRA and the legal advice wasn't for you not to take action on this. It was to let you know what those choices are. Because you could very easily also vote to not recommend this, which is, you did vote not to recommend it in the operating budget for some very serious reasons, and that includes some of your private industry in your community, which is why many people take time to implement something like this. So you could put your stamp on there because people look to you to also recommend this stuff because we're supposedly the experts on these things. So whether it's, I wouldn't get into the habit of not reviewing petition warrant articles and just taking no action for the sake of doing it, because the public does take your advice on that, which is why it's an important stance.
Except in this case, it's over the tax cap, so we're.
Correct, so you're stating your priorities based on the law that you're dealing with.
It's kind of a difficult situation because we all support the idea of full-day kindergarten. We see the problems in implementing it this year, this coming school year. So we would be faced with a disingenuous vote against it and not recommending it, which could be interpreted as that we don't support it.
Right.
But
There's a difference between supporting it and funding the money for it.
exactly, it comes down to, we believe it's not the right time, as opposed to, we don't think it's a good idea. So, if we were to vote yes, and recommend it, then it doesn't work. So,
So I think
I think the best course of action is to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So So the question, though, in front of us still is the order of these, and there's also the suggestion that maybe we rescind support for the first petition warrant article on the football, the junior rares program. If these had come in at the same time, I think it'd be easy to have the same action taken on them. In theory, I like your idea. I don't like the idea of taking back the vote.
I think that might send a
I think
message
you
too.
can,
Yeah.
I think you can handle it with an explanation at the time. And I don't know what your personal position is going to be on that article, but that's one I'm going to speak to by assignment.
The football one.
Right.
Right.
So I'm going to speak in favor of it. And
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion
Oh, okay.
that,
But were you done your
no,
statement?
I just want to suggest that maybe you can also get up and speak at that point and explain that this came in earlier and we had time and we decided to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
That's all. And then you're going to explain.
I generally recommend let the voters decide,
Yeah.
which, yes?
I'd like to make a motion that we move Article 6 to the end, thereby putting Article 7 behind Article 5.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry, can I just suggest a friendly amendment? Can you be a little more specific? Even though it's article numbers for the record, can you say what Article 6 is?
I would like to move the operating budget, Article 6, to the end of the warrant, and move the petition warrant article for kindergarten.
We don't have to move it if that one's going to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
6
Dawn?
becomes 7 and 7
Yeah,
becomes 6.
yeah.
Yes.
And a second by Dawn. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passed by aye. The next item on the agenda is just other business, and really there was just one that I had, which was, we do not have time to do our warrant article explanation printout that we mailed the last 2 years before the deliberative session next Saturday. So, do you want to create one and have it as a handout at the deliberative session, and then we could have additional copies at the polling places? Christine shaking her head, yes.
Just to clarify,
Yep.
I'm okay with doing that if we do that on the board. So we meaning the 7 members or a subset of the 7 members that get together as we've done the past 2 times we've done this and agree on the content to present to the rest of the board.
I think you decided.
We did.
I remember who was going to do
Last
it.
time.
I'll look at it.
Well, it was you, me, and Sue, and it turned out that you were ill.
No, I mean, for this time,
Oh.
we
Talked about it at the
decided at our
last
last meeting. Jeff and Paul and I will work online to do the descriptions for the warrant.
Okay, all right, so the 3 of us are committed to present, which we'll have time to do, to the rest of the board also, if we want to do that. But my point is, this is a board initiative. This was a communication from the board, and it's not something we, A, want to burden the superintendent with, or B, want her to do on our behalf in the past. And I just offer that as history.
And I kind of started some of it, but we can certainly take
And we
over.
appreciate
I
that.
will say
given
that,
the
and if I can defer to Sue, how long do the printers need to print the, I mean, these are not something that our copier can manage to print 500 copies of. So
Right.
we're gonna need, do you know about how long the printers would take to?
They're not gonna be mailing them, are
just
they?
copies of
Just
them?
copies of them? I think we could have them for the deliberative session. It was the whole mailing and making sure they got to people that was really tight. I think we could probably get them on the 29th, I mean, not,
Well,
don't do it, but I think the 29th would be doable.
So you need copy from us before.
yeah, that's
way
the
before.
pressure.
But that's a piece that, that's what I was trying to figure out, like, how many days do you think they need lead time to
I think
get
we're
it?
talking like, the latest was the 26th,
Monday.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, so the option is for us to, under duress, now, create it and distribute it for the deliberative session, or just do that orally, because its intent was to get people to go to the deliberative session in the first place, given what the warrant articles were. We're not going to have time to mail that out to get people to go. So if it's used as a voter's guide, which I'm okay with, we have plenty of time to get it done, worded, printed, and distributed to all the polling places. So no pressure.
Could it also be added to the website? Once it's been-
Well, it's always,
Yeah, we can always put it on the website.
I'm not sure we can
So-
have it at the polling place.
So I was gonna say, you would have to put it would have to be in a very ubiquitous kind of place, like within, wherever they have handouts of some sort. You can't put it at the entrance to a polling place, I don't think they'll allow that. You can't have any political information within so many feet of
I think it's
the,
like 10 feet.
within the,
Where people have to
My recommendation would be to mail them out.
After the first deliberative.
And have them available at the first deliberative as well.
But not mailed.
You'll save a considerable amount of money to just have them available at the deliberative session as a printout.
But then
Except
Don's
that it
saying,
can
and then you
change.
mail them afterwards.
Part of our goals is to have better communication with the community, and this is one of those.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to send them out. I mean, it is more information about the warrant articles, as opposed to, Joe
For
Smith
the
who
ones
just goes
that-
without having any information.
For the ones that don't come to the deliberative session.
That there's potential that you might have to change it depending on what happens at deliberative session, so you can't print them all.
Right.
You want to just print however many for
Print
deliberative
enough.
session, and then send the printer, we can do that at the office, but then send the printer the one to be mailed, because,
Public comment wasn't there. But.
just in case something changed.
Yeah, sorry, two conversations. I like your idea. I think it's smart to know, that, we see this many of this many. Yeah. First, we gotta get it together.
So would it be safe to say that if the group can get it together for a deliberative session, well, we can print some of those at the office, but then we'll plan to do the mass mailing one as a voter's guide after deliberative?
In February. Okay. Sound good? Okay, any other business?
Just in recognition that we see members of the public attending our meeting. If there are any public comments, I'd like to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any public comment?
There's one error. The time for Bridgewater is 12 to 6, not 11 to 7.
So we confirm these all with
The 11 to 7 for us is when we have state or federal elections, 12 to 6.
12 to 6.
For local, when there's no other. So we start at 7:30, we wouldn't have time to do it.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yes, could you just clarify that if the $250,000 that's on the petition warrant article for the kindergarten gets voted in, does that become part of next year's operating budget, like to start with? Okay.
It's included in the budget.
In addition to.
So I also think it's unfortunate that you couldn't put underneath that where you voted, a post casting or showing your vote in support of football, you couldn't put, unfortunately, the budget committee cannot legally support this, just to let people know that.
That's why we
Put it on our
asked,
mailing.
I guess we should do that. And that's why we asked our chair to speak on it.
Okay.
Make a comment. Before, didn't you raise the point that if the 250,000 is passed, then how do we fund it in 16, 17? Right?
Cover the area.
That money would
Was that
actually
you
become
with
part of
that?
our operating budget.
That does become part, because your assessment is what gets capped. So your assessment would have to pay for the 250,000, so it'd get reset and you'd apply that cap to it again.
Yeah. It's like the teacher's contract, that money then becomes part of our operating budget for the following year.
Anyone else? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Yes, there's a motion to adjourn by Vincent Paul at 7:48. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Don.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.